I found his bucket list in his wallet. Number 12. Get married before 30. His birthday was tomorrow. That's when his best friend leaned over and whispered, "I bet you $50,000 you won't marry her." I never expected to become someone's impulse wedding, or their greatest love. Hi, I'm Olivia, just your average 27-year-old trying to make it in the city with a job I tolerated, an apartment I could barely afford, and dreams that seemed stuck in perpetual pause. 3 months ago, I was that girl who always showed up to family gatherings alone, fielding the dreaded "still single" questions while watching my younger cousins build lives with partners who adored them. My dating history, a collection of almost relationships and ghosting stories that my friends had heard one too many times over our Tuesday wine nights. I wasn't looking for love that Friday night at the rooftop bar. I was just there to celebrate my best friend's promotion, nursing an overpriced cocktail and counting the minutes until I could slip away without seeming rude. That's when he walked in, James Matthews, with his perfect smile and contagious laugh, surrounded by friends who clearly worshipped him. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I felt that spark people always talk about. But I never, not in my wildest dreams, imagined that less than 48 hours later, I'd be standing in a courthouse becoming his wife. And I certainly never expected that a marriage built on a drunken bet would change everything I thought I knew about love. Stay until the end to see how I turned a fake marriage into the most genuine love story of my life, and the 3 lessons that saved us both. Because sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unlikely circumstances. I first spotted James at the bar, ordering another round for his friends. He had this confidence that wasn't arrogance, more like he was comfortable in his own skin in a way I'd always envied. When he caught me staring, I quickly looked away, but not before noticing his amused smile. An hour later, fate intervened when he ended up beside me at the crowded bar. "Let me guess," he said. "You're also wondering why they need 4 bartenders, but still take 10 minutes to make a simple drink." His voice was warm, with just enough playfulness to make me laugh despite myself. We talked for what felt like minutes, but turned out to be nearly 2 hours. James was charming, successful, and surprisingly easy to talk to. A marketing executive who traveled often, but loved coming home to New York. It was around midnight when his friend, I'd later know him as Derek, stumbled over, clearly a few drinks beyond his limit. I excused myself to the restroom, and that's when I overheard them. Derek was slurring his words, but I heard it clearly. 30 tomorrow, man. Your bucket list is a disaster. Still haven't checked off number 12, married before 30. James laughed it off, but Derek pressed on. 50 grand says you won't marry the next woman you talk to. When I returned, James looked at me differently. I assumed our connection was fading as the night wore on. I never imagined that his sudden intensity came from seeing me as his $50,000 opportunity. The proposal came the next morning, a phone call that changed everything. "I know this sounds insane," he said, "but would you consider marrying me? Today?" Looking back, I should have hung up immediately, but something in his voice, a blend of desperation and sincerity, kept me listening. James asked to meet at a cafe near my apartment, promising to explain everything. Against my better judgment, I agreed. 2 hours later, I sat across from him as he laid out the most bizarre proposition I'd ever heard. "It's a year-long marriage," he explained. "We sign papers, live together for appearance's sake, and then quietly divorce. I win the bet, and I'll split the money with you, $25,000 for a year of your life." I should have been offended. I should have walked away. But the truth, I was drowning in student loans. My apartment lease was ending, with rent increasing beyond what I could afford. And beneath my outrage, there was curiosity. About him, about this wild deviation from my carefully planned life. "Why me?" I asked. "You could find plenty of women willing to marry you without this elaborate scheme." Because you seem real, he answered, and because when we talked last night, I didn't feel like I was performing for once. There was vulnerability in his eyes that didn't match his ridiculous proposal. I told him I'd think about it. That night, I made pro-con lists, called my sister, who thought I'd lost my mind, and paced until my downstairs neighbor banged on their ceiling. By morning, financial practicality won over romance. I texted him, "I'm in, but I have conditions." We were married by sunset at City Hall, strangers becoming spouses with the stroke of a pen, neither of us understanding how completely our lives were about to change. Moving into James's sleek downtown apartment felt like stepping into someone else's life. His space was immaculate, minimal, and painfully bachelor. Expensive furniture arranged like a magazine spread, but with no photographs, no personal touches. Just like our marriage, it looked perfect on the surface, but lacked any real foundation. Those first weeks were a masterclass in awkwardness. We established boundaries through stilted conversations, who sleeps where, separate rooms, bathroom schedules, he's an early riser, I'm not, and kitchen territories, he barely used it anyway. We were like reluctant roommates performing a strange play for an audience that didn't exist within our walls. The outside world was another story. James had casually told friends he'd met someone special before our whirlwind wedding, which apparently made our sudden marriage shocking but not completely unbelievable. I became an expert at deflecting questions about our love story, crafting vague answers about knowing when you know, and sometimes life surprises you. Our first dinner party as a couple was excruciating. Under the table, James squeezed my hand when I froze after his friend asked how he proposed. The gesture surprised me, gentle, reassuring, and I found myself creating a romantic story that made everyone sigh with envy. Later, alone in our kitchen, we laughed about it until my sides hurt. It was the first real moment between us, a shared secret, creating an unexpected bond. But reality would crash back each morning. I'd find his coffee mug in the sink, evidence of his existence in my fake life, and wonder what I'd gotten myself into. The money seemed less worth it with each day of living this elaborate lie. 3 months into our arrangement, something shifted. It started with small things. James bringing home my favorite takeout after noticing the empty containers in our trash, or me organizing his chaotic home office when he stressed about a deadline. We weren't just coexisting anymore, we were noticing each other. The real turning point came during a thunderstorm that knocked out power in our building. I've been terrified of storms since childhood, something I'd never mentioned to James. When he found me huddled on the bathroom floor during a particularly loud thunderclap, I expected judgment. Instead, he sat beside me with candles and his iPad loaded with comedy specials. "My sister has the same fear," he explained simply. We stayed there for hours, laughing in the flickering light, shoulders touching. After that night, the careful distance we'd maintained began to dissolve. Our conversations stretched later into evenings, moving from surface-level small talk to deeper waters. I learned about his parents' divorce that left him cynical about marriage, his drive stemming from growing up with financial insecurity, and the bucket list that started as a joke in college but became his roadmap for life. One Saturday morning, I came down with a fever that left me barely able to stand. James cancelled his weekend plans without hesitation, making soup and checking my temperature with a gentleness that made my heart ache. Delirious with fever, I asked why he bothered. His answer haunted me for days. "Because somehow, you've become important to me." I found myself looking forward to coming home, not to our apartment, but to him. It terrified me. This wasn't part of our agreement, feelings weren't in the contract. 6 months in, and our carefully constructed facade began developing cracks. Derek, the friend behind the bet, started asking questions. "You two seem different lately," he commented during a game night, eyes narrowing as James automatically passed me a drink, mixed exactly how I liked it. Almost like you're actually married. The joke landed with uncomfortable weight in the room. Family pressures mounted from both sides. My mother called weekly with not-so-subtle hints about grandchildren. "You're not getting any younger, Olivia," she'd remind me, unaware that my marriage had an expiration date. James's parents invited us for a weekend at their lake house, where his mother pulled out his baby photos and talked about continuing the family tradition of naming firstborn sons after their grandfathers. Each of these moments felt like tiny daggers, reminders of the lie we were living. What hurt more was realizing I'd started imagining what those scenarios might actually be like. A child with James's smile and my eyes, holidays where our family traditions merged naturally rather than through careful negotiation. One night, I caught James watching me as I read on the couch. Something in his expression made my heart skip, a softness I'd never seen before. When I asked what he was thinking, he quickly looked away. "Nothing important," he said, but the moment lingered between us like a question neither dared to ask. I started cataloguing these moments, storing them away, his hand lingering on my lower back when we navigated crowded rooms. The way he remembered small details from stories I'd told weeks ago, how he'd started saying "we" instead of "I" when making future plans. I wasn't sure if I was imagining what I wanted to see or if something real was growing in the artificial environment we'd created. What terrified me most wasn't the possibility that he felt nothing, but that I felt everything. It happened 8 months into our arrangement. I was searching for a document James needed for work when I found it, a contract signed by both James and Derek. The bet wasn't just about getting married before 30. There were clauses about maintaining the appearance of a genuine relationship, cohabitation for minimum 12 months, and no disclosure of arrangement to any parties. The final line delivered the cruelest blow. Upon successful completion, funds to be used for down payment on bachelor property in Colorado. Bachelor property. The future he'd been planning didn't include me at all. Every late-night conversation, every moment I'd thought meant something. They were just excellent performances from a man with $50,000 on the line. When James came home that evening, I was waiting with the contract between us on the coffee table. The color drained from his face when he saw it. Was any of it real? My voice didn't sound like my own. Or am I just the means to your mountain view? "Olivia, I can explain." "Explain what? That you never planned to tell me about the full terms? That I'm just a stepping stone to your real life?" What followed was the kind of argument that leaves nothing undamaged. Words became weapons, aimed precisely at newfound vulnerabilities. I accused him of manipulation. He claimed I had no right to be upset when I'd agreed to a business arrangement. The truth hung between us. We'd both begun wanting something neither had bargained for. I packed a bag while he stood silently in the doorway. "The contract says you need to maintain appearances for 12 months, I said, voice hollow. "I'll stay at my sister's. Tell everyone we're going through a rough patch. You'll still get your money." As I walked out, James called after me. It didn't start real, but it became real for me. I didn't turn back. I couldn't tell if it was another line in his performance or the first honest thing he'd said to me. 3 weeks passed with no contact. I threw myself into work, trying to convince myself that the emptiness I felt was just the disruption to my routine. My sister saw through it immediately. "You fell in love with him," she said one night. Not a question, just a statement of fact that I couldn't bring myself to deny. On the 23rd day of our separation, I received a text from James. "Please check your email." No pressure, no emotional plea, just a simple request that I almost ignored. When I finally opened it, I found a video attachment with no subject line. The video showed Derek holding up a check for $50,000, then ripping it to shreds. "I'm officially releasing you from our bet," he said to someone off camera, "because I've never seen you like this over anyone." The camera panned to James, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. I made the bet because I was afraid, James's voice narrated over the footage. Turning 30 meant admitting I'd failed at the one thing my parents got right, finding someone to love completely. The video continued with clips of our apartment, now filled with framed photos of us, my books mingled with his, evidence of a shared life I hadn't noticed we were building. It ended with James sitting on our couch, looking directly at the camera. The bet brought you into my life, but it's not why I want you to stay. I love you, Olivia. Not for a year, not for a bet. For real. That night, I found myself back at our door. When James opened it, words failed us both. Instead, he silently handed me a new document, our marriage certificate, with a note scrawled across it. This time, no expiration date. We rebuilt slowly, with honesty as our foundation. We renewed our vows 6 months later, not at City Hall, but surrounded by people who'd watched our strange beginning transform into something genuine. Today marks our 2nd anniversary, not of our courthouse ceremony, but of the day we chose each other for real. Our story isn't perfect. Sometimes when we argue, I still wonder if he's calculating his escape route to Colorado. And sometimes, when I'm being particularly stubborn, James jokes that the bet wasn't worth the trouble. But then, he'll reach for my hand across the dinner table, and I know we've built something stronger than either of us imagined possible. The bet is long forgotten, but the lessons remain. First, sometimes the worst decisions lead to the best outcomes. I said yes to a marriage of convenience and found a love that's anything but. Second, authenticity finds its way through even the most carefully constructed facades. We started pretending to love each other and ended up unable to pretend we didn't. And finally, real love isn't about perfect beginnings. It's about choosing each other every day, especially when it's difficult. Last month, we found James's old bucket list while moving into our new home. Number 12 had been crossed out and rewritten. Find someone who makes you want to be better than you are. Mission accomplished, I'd say. Life has a strange way of giving you exactly what you need through the most unexpected circumstances. A fake marriage taught me what real love feels like. Messy, challenging, and absolutely worth every risk. If you're out there wondering if you'll ever find your person, remember, love rarely arrives in the package you're expecting. Don't forget to subscribe and share your own unexpected love story in the comments. Because sometimes, the best things in life start with the worst decisions. And stay tuned next week when I reveal the wedding vows we wrote for our real ceremony. Trust me, they're worth waiting for.